we were looking at how we join this bit up to here, because we've got quite a curved section on these surfaces here, and then it goes very flat towards the end. So it's trying to get that transition from one to the other is the tricky bit. I was looking last week, was trying to, or the other day rather, I was going through possible options here. So let's just take all the control, the CVs off. And because what I want to do is there's an area in the center of here which is going to be flat. There's going to be similar sort of section to here, but the outside edges of this surface are going to be curved over. So what I was thinking, if you remember, was first of all, so if I use this one of these brushes, I put a bit of radius on it. What I was thinking was initially, I thought I'll do something like this, and then I was thinking we could do that. But the problem with that is that we're going to, this edge is then an intersect between this surface and that surface, and that's going to be wobbly. It's going to be uncontrollable. So you know, the other edges being that and that, that's not going to be good. So I'll just use Control Z just to get back to that. Then I was thinking that maybe what we should do is actually sort of cross over. That's not. Yeah. So yeah, what I was thinking was, to go back a bit further, was to come off here and then peel away here and actually go on that side. Something like that. That's very badly drawn, but that's supposed to be a nice smooth curve. So this would all be gently rounded that direction. And then I thought, well, actually, that's not necessary. But there's actually another way of doing this. So if this surface here, this big surface here, can sort of capture the shape around this area, we don't actually need to take the side surface all the way down there. So I think what we'd be better off doing is something like this, where that's one edge. So we keep that curve exactly, so we can control that, and then we put in an edge there, and an edge there, and an edge there. Again, very badly drawn. It's supposed to be sort of parallel, but this bit would be the bit that goes from flat at this end to curved at this end, and then the center area is all defined by this surface in here. So that's my latest thinking. That would be a lot easier to construct, and by the time you get here, it's actually washed out into this surface. Right. So, I mean, I can keep that. Like I say, if I go into the construction plane editor, I can just turn that off. I should give it a name, so we'll call it sketch 01 in case we get to 99 of them, which is highly unlikely. So that's my idea. So far, I was just thinking about that the other day. Now, the other thing we need to do is we sort of need this surface in the center to transition from curved to flat here. So let's put in some sections here. We've got these X sections, and we'll put in a Y0 as well. I mean, put multiple Ys on, but the Y0 is the most important, really. And if we look at that, those surfaces sort of look as though they come together quite nicely in terms of a Y. In terms of X, we've got a section, this blue section here, and this one here. So they're quite different, but then we're going to take the difference with this little side surface, what I'd call a ribbon surface. What I just sketched, I'd call it a ribbon surface because it's very long and thin. Now, what's useful often is if you've got two overlapping surfaces like that, and you're trying to establish how to transition from one to the other. The obvious way, and this is what I would have done a long time ago in the past, would have been, instead of having them overlapping, I'd just have one butting up against the other, and then align them, and then modify one and see what the other one does, which is perfectly fine and can give you good results. But I prefer to overlap them so I can see where each of these surfaces is heading. Because if we then trim convert those back to another point, we'll end up with a super smooth pair of surfaces which almost join up without you having to even align them. So on this one, to get a clearer idea, maybe I should just isolate those two, and I'll just pick the mesh as well, and just isolate that lot so we're clear what we're looking at. Now what we can do here is extend this surface a bit further and just see what happens. So we can see it curves down here, so we really want to extend it further. I could extend it all the way to the back edge, to be honest, and see what happens. And you can see it's still very curved. In fact, it sort of looks like it's curving more as we extend it. So by extending it, we're just getting an idea of where this surface is heading, whether it's actually getting flatter or what it's doing. Doesn't mean I'll trim convert it at that point or anything. It just means that by extending it, I can see what's happening. The problem is if I took it to the back edge and then aligned it to this edge here, which I could do in G0, I could do that, and then I could put an edge, this surface, I could trim convert to this edge. I don't like that idea because it would be difficult to control the shape from here, from this surface to that one. I'd rather have the back edge, whole of this area, defined by this big block because it's nice and simple. We have less likely problem with trying to transition this way. So I'm intending to trim and convert this back somewhere, but I don't know where yet. But the first thing to do is to just try and get this surface to be a little bit more consistent with this towards this back edge. So we'll put these CVs on. Now we've only got degree 5, and that's taken us all the way from the front right to the back, which is, it's trying to do an awful lot with very few CVs, which is always a good idea. Of course, you want to keep things simple, but we really want to make this maybe a little bit more localized. If I start to try and pull these CVs up in the Z direction, which is what I need to do to flatten that off. And if you watch what's going on here we're slightly high on the data, if anything. So if I pull this up, you can see, I'm flattening it off here, but it's pulling it further away there. Now, if I increase the degree, what that means is that if I make that degree 7, for example, now I can make the change more localized. So I've got a bit more, a degree 7 over that distance is absolutely acceptable because it's such a large shape. If I move that now, you see the shape up here doesn't move very much at all. It still moves, but not very much. Now, like I say, we could, rather than doing that, so I'm just doing Control Z there to get back. We could actually take that right to the back edge. That'd be a simple way of doing it rather than messing around with that. And we're just going to do a trim convert on that in that view. I'll just make sure that I haven't got keep originals on because that catches me out a lot. So it's worth doing. And then we also need to remember, because we've done a trim convert, that we no longer have symmetry on that. So we've got to go back into symmetry and put that back on again. And then we can, so you can see how much different that is to the back edge. I've still got my degree 7. So if I was to move those points up, get a similar result to before where I'm doing a change here, but it's not so affected up here. So if I do an align here, I get the same effect. Now, if you remember when I was aligning this surface to the back surface, we had a bit of a problem because it was a partial edge and it was moving the points out in the Y direction. So if you want to keep the these points only moving up and down in Z, then with a line, the best way to do that is to duplicate this edge with a curve. So let's go into curve edits, duplicate, no rebuild, with that. So we've now got that curve. And then in the plan view, top view, like so, I want to trim that curve back to these points so that when we align it, we're aligning it to that curve and it will only go up and down in Z, it won't start moving out in the Y direction. Like if I, just to recall that, if we go into Object Edit and say Align G0, and I put on partial. So this is what happened before. If I tried to do this, that'll, again, Align was going to break the symmetry. If I put partial onto that edge, and it didn't change it very much, but it has moved those points out in the Y direction because it's dropping the points normal to the surface. Whereas if you want it exactly in that view to keep it exactly the same, then use the curve. Now that curve, it may well be that these, when I try and trim it back to these edges, it probably won't do it because they don't actually cross over completely. So we might need to extend those. Oh, okay. So we've got away with that. That's fine. So we can now align the edge of this surface to that curve. So do Object Edit, Line, and this time we don't need partial on, and we'll align it to that curve there. Now, if you're bothered about the position of those points, you can. I didn't really see anything happen there, but it probably doesn't matter anyway, to be honest, because looking at the spacing of those points to those points, actually those are narrower than that, which is, I'd expect those to be out of it. We can see if position influence will make a change, because position influence of 0 means the CVs stay more or less where they were, but making it 1 will make them line up with the CVs of the curve that they're matching to. Now we don't need this 100% because this is all just to get to try and get these surfaces coming together. We've got a maximum gap of 0.002. That's more than close enough for what we're doing at the minute, because I'm not trying to get that to that back edge. I'm actually going to trim convert it back at some point or do something with it. I'm not actually going to take it all that way. So we'll do that. Now I'll take history off as well. I don't want history on. I don't want that changing anyway. Just want to keep it as it is. So one of the things that I did notice before is that we've raised that up to the data, and it may well be. And if you looked at the section coming down here, and if you remember when we were looking at a curve up here and this section down here, it seems like the intersect here is down here, and then it rises up, and I didn't like that. I wanted to make that go straight across. So I'm expecting a difference between our Y section here and the data in any case. Now I'm not sure which section I'm looking at there, so when I highlight it you can see it. Now we can, so we are higher than the data there. We're also, it's a slightly different shape to this because this has actually raised that up. So we can tweak these points, these CVs, to try and something move them in the Z direction a bit. See if we can just get that. It's not so much getting it to the data, it's more getting it to the other surface really that we're mainly interested in. But also, of course, there's no reason why we can't change that surface because there's nothing. But I'm looking at that again. Compared with this surface, that's a bit low. And I'm around this area. I have to ignore the mesh because of this intersect problem down the back end. I'm actually raising that up from where the mesh is. So we can modify this surface as well. And in this case, I'm going to just pick the whole of that hole there, move that up and down instead. So I'm trying to overlap the blue here. We'd actually take out the mesh because that's really interfering with our view of this. So they come together pretty close now, and that's what I'm trying to do. And the reason I'm trying to do that is that at some point I'm going to have to convert these back to some location. It might be just simply an X value that we choose, or some other place, but whatever it is, I want to make sure that the two surfaces come together in that space and they're almost identical at that point. save that model. Can't see the time. Move that way. In fact, I'm going to this control panel. I'm going to get this diagnostic shade up here, because if I drag that with the, so I'm using the middle mouse button to drag that. This being 2024, you can do this sort of thing. So it becomes another tab up there, which is great, I think. And we can. I want to resize this thing. Let's just move that. If I take the whole thing, just drop it into here. Can't see the reason I'm moving that way is because I can't see the bottom of this window. This is the one that was the problem. So, I don't actually need that, because I tend to pick the sections from the top there for some reason. I don't know why. And then I've got that as a hotkey, but I will keep it on. This one I'll make this size. So if I put that all back in place, so if I move it over to the right hand side, it'll pop to there. Still too big. Can't see. Oh, right. Can see the date just about down there. That was window there. Right. So that's what I was trying to get to, but I couldn't see it. 17. So let's put that back up there, and I'll make this a bit wider, and then we can. I could put that up there as well, I suppose. Yeah, so I've got those 3 tabs up there. So I've just used the middle mouse button to do that. It just gives more space down here to see when I open up all these menus, you can see it. Use up a lot of space there. Right. Yeah, so I'm trying to get to this. I get these to join up here. Like I say, with our sketch, so if we're going to construction plane editor, which I have got as hotkey P, actually, I should get into the habit of using that. And we'll switch that sketch back on and look at it. So that was my sketch. Those blue lines in there, I was saying this is the sort of ribbon surface that I want to help me on the outside edges. So it's just the center area that we need to bring together. So really what I'm saying, I suppose, is that I need to trim this surface, or trim convert it back to some place about here. If I do that, then we can, that's the edge of that as well. And that would make some sense, I think. Take that off. Right, so I'm now going to get into top view there. We hide this side glass there. I know I've got both sides on. It's just because I might need both, but obviously that's just a mirror of that. I can get rid of them, one of them eventually. Just put those in the side glass, just get that out of the way. Okay, so I think what I'm going to just have to do is, the other thing I could do here, just to see how these all come together in the middle, we could look at evaluate deviation map, and we'll say the acceptable distance between those two, maybe 0.5 of a mil, something, and we'll say the ramp distance, so the overall distance that we want to look at is 2 mil. So I'm going to compare that surface, and if you remember with this function, it's actually looking for a mesh by default. So we have to specify, get rid of this actually, we're not using that, just using that standard palette. By default, it's looking for a mesh. The highlighting here is terrible, I think, because that looks to me as though it's looking for surface. But if I try and pick the surface, it doesn't pick it. So you have to pick on surface, which now looks like it's not highlighted, but it is. And then I can pick the surface, press the space bar, and wow, by some miracle, all that green area is within 0.5 of a mil. I was not expecting that to be quite so close, but that's great because I mean it's pretty unlikely we get it any closer than that. If I made that 0.25, so there is an area in the middle where it's outside 0.25, but between 0.25 and 0.5, that blue area. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. It was so close. I was not expecting that. So let's go into the diagnostic menu there. Just take the shading off. If I was doing A class, I'd probably try and get it, within 0.1 of a mil or something. But I'm not going to bother here. I'm just going to hope that this works out. Now, some point here, I'm going to have this little ribbon surface, and I want all of the edges to be consistent. So the edge going across here are consistent with these surfaces here. Now I've got a layer called Originals, which is where I've got that huge surface that we started at the top of on, and I don't want to get rid of this surface, but I do want to trim convert it. But I will keep that as a copy just in case I want to go back. Likewise with this one. So what we'll do is, just to make so I don't lose these, I'm going to just copy those, Control C, Control V, and then I'll put those on the original there. Back to top. So we've got those in the background in the original, in case I should need those huge surfaces again, having put quite a bit of work into them. Because the trouble is, the next step I'm going to do is is quite a big step, because I'm thinking of just putting a straight line across there. Although, let's see what happens if I extend this. So remember, this is a copy, so I can do whatever I like with it because I've got the originals back there. I'm just wondering whether that might be better just to extend it, because if I do that, I'm extending it backwards, which is the same as trim or detaching rather. It's the same effect, but what it means is that surface is 100% the same as the original in terms of its shape. I think I'll be better off doing that. The trouble is, if I do, I'll show you what happens if I don't do that. If I just do a line, do a line straight from here across to here. Put that on right here, for the time being. If I do that, let's get rid of the sections. I have a menu up there. Oh, I've done. Accidentally pressed that arrow somehow. So if I go into cross section, I can fill here. Then yeah, I just want to take all these sections off so we can see more clearly what I'm doing. So if I use that line there and I'll go and surface edit, the chances are this won't be too bad. But if I say keep originals, just so we can compare the two, I can actually put surface deviation. So this is going to be the difference between the trim converted one and the original. You can also show edge deviation, so the difference between the edges, the theoretical edge that we're creating and the actual edge. But in this case, I want surface deviation. So we're going to pick that surface there. I'm using project and Z, which is what I want. And so that's the curve, that's the area I want to keep. I convert that. And it says the maximum distance between the two is 0.003. So it's nothing at all. But sometimes trim converts, because trim convert is an approximation always, unless the curve is an isopalm, in which case it should be 100%. But depending on how you trim it, the more the curve is going at some weird angle across the surface, the more of an approximation it is. So you can see it's an approximation, but in this case, it's very accurate. Actually, that would be perfectly fine. And I think having a straight line obviously is simpler because we can make sure the CVs are on that straight line at all times, etc. It's easier to work with. Doesn't mean the curves, doing it as a curve, will be right at all. So I will go with that option, just because it's simpler. And then I'll get rid of this. If you've got a copy of that in our originals anyway. Likewise, I want to trim this one and convert. Again, we've got a copy of that in our original. So I don't want to keep originals on. I'm not really interested in how much that deviates, to be honest. And we end up with that. So what will be interesting, obviously that's curved and that isn't. But we're going to only use the centre bit. If we do a surface continuity there and just see what the gap is between the two. So if I increase the scale there, you can see that area there. Well, on the outside it is 5 mil, which is not surprising because we've got this is curved and this isn't. But we're going to deal with that in a minute. And then if I look in the information window, we can see, we should see that this centre bit is within 0.5 of a mil. If we go into display and we want to put on, where is it? I'm looking at the wrong. Actually, that's the wrong menu. Yeah, that's not the wrong menu, but it's the wrong function that I'm thinking of. So let's go and get rid of that. If we go into locators and compare the on that one, yeah, it's going to be curve to curve. So it'll give us a similar view, but if I compare that edge with that edge, okay, we'll do that. And then, so if, in case you're wondering how I'm doing that, this left-hand mouse button is increasing the scale, middle mouse button is increasing the number of samples, or you can go into the information window and you can, the comb step is the step between these lines. So if I wanted more and you want to be more precise, you can just say 5 so you get more, or 20 and get less. So in other words, it's the distance between those, not the numbers. So if I put in 5, and you've got min max on here to show the comb, you can specify what they call a threshold. So if I say I want to look at what's within 0.5 of the mil, put that in, and it's saying that where it's green is within 0.5 of the mil. So there's an area there which is slightly outside of that. And if you want to find out what that is, you can put say 0.6, and you can tell that's all within 0.6. So it's close enough for what we want. We will have to change it slightly, but that's fine. I'm actually thinking, how the heck am I going to get from here to here? Yeah, so again, you know, you've seen how I'm sort of trying to show you my thought processes, which aren't always perfect, and they you know, I iterate through as I'm going. But I'm just suddenly thinking, actually, I can't just align this to that. That's just not going to work. Impossible, because then I completely flatten that end out. Not the thing to do, probably. So let's go back to that sketch. I'm going to create a new sketch. So we've actually gone a bit further. I mean, maybe I need to go a bit further down there actually than I've gone. So instead of, I drew that down here, and actually, if I bring that back a bit, maybe that's the thing to do. So we can just make that exactly where that edge is anybody's guess, to be honest. So I'm going to just take that back a bit. I think I've probably, that's too far, but I'm just going to move that up that way, take it about there. The thing is, I need the width of this. I need this to go from here to here because that curve starts from that point there. So I need this to be at least to the corner there. So I'm now going to go to surface edit rather, do a trim convert, reject Z, should be all the same settings as I had before, keep original is off, do that. Now I'm thinking maybe that was a mistake cutting that across a straight line, but it's not going to be a big mistake because we're only going to use the centre part of that anyway. When we trim this out, not much of this is left, to be honest. So it really doesn't matter. But I think that might help a little bit. Drag that down there. I'll do another trim convert. I don't have to go into the view. I know what this is going to do. Project Z doesn't have to be in the view. I'll just do that. And then just out of curiosity, again, we can go into locators and we pick curve to curve, compare that to that. Go into the information window and just to see what's the threshold. If I make that 0.5, well, pretty much all of that's within 0.5, as we'd expect, because we saw that before in the color display anyway. So let's go with that. Let's go with that. So the one thing that so let's go just do another sketch here, just to show you what I'm thinking now. So we need to go and go to markup, and I'm going to go and put some lines on. So what I'm now thinking is that we've got this edge here. I'm going to put another edge here. That edge across there. I've probably drawn that a bit too wide, to be honest, because we need to keep the center line area there. And then probably, I think what I need to do is actually trim convert this across here. Because then we can put so if I draw the other side as well, so we've got that coming in there. Again, it's a little bit wider than I've meant to draw. Something like that. So this area in here is going to be the transition between this bit and this bit. But I'm going to take it from here. So I'm going to just do a trim convert, keep original, and create a little bit in there which can transition from here to here. And then these will join up the edges. And I think that will work this time. I'm hoping. So that one. Right, so I'm now going to save that again. Okay, let's so what I now need to do, again in top view, get rid of that curve, don't need the curve now. Actually, I'm going to reuse that curve. So I'm going to move that up there. Don't need to do this, but I'm going to put pivot there and then move it actually up to the end of that curve there. So we've got to go straight across there. Now we've got our original big surfaces there. So if we ever decided, which is highly likely sometimes, ever decided we need to go back and start again, which wouldn't be the first time, we can go back to that. But I'm not going to bother. So I'm not going to worry about trimming, trim converting these and dividing this up. That's our big surface there. So I'm going to just trim convert it across here. We're going to surface edit, and I don't want to keep original, but I do want both sides. So I'm going to go and pick that surface, pick the curve, and then I want that bit, and I want that bit, and then I want to divide it. So I'm going to click on divide down here. So we get those two versions. I could put show edge surface deviations on if I wanted to see what's happening there, because I'm using a straight line and I'm cutting across there. It will be an approximation of the original. I'm looking at that and thinking it's actually quite a big change, 0.4 of a mil. I'm thinking I might reverse and not do it that way. So the other alternative, so instead of doing trim convert, if I don't want to change it that much, which is I'm a bit thinking that's probably a bad idea, to be honest, I'm going to use detach instead. So what detach does is it'll keep 100% the original surface. So I'm deliberately going to create a copy of that surface just so I can prove that. So if I say, actually in detach, does it have an original? Keep originals, that's what we want. Excellent. So I'm going to do that. Now I want to pick a detached location. So I want to go from here. I'm just grabbing that. This is creating an iso palm, which is where I'm going to detach this. In other words, do a trim. It's like a trim convert, but to an iso palm effectively. But I want this iso palm to hit that end point there. So I need to use Control Alt on this curve here and go across to that point there, and then say go. Now I've got, because I've put the keep originals on, I can compare the two. So I'm 100% certain that that's exactly the same as the original, but I will check it. It's always good to check absolutely everything, even when you're 100% convinced. If I say surface to surface, which is another way of checking these things, measure that back to the original. It says maximum 0. So this one again, back to the original, whichever one that one is, that one, maximum 0. So that's always the case with detach, but always worth checking these things. You can always take a moment to do it, and it's worth doing. I mean, something while I'm just picking that is, you see it says surface and surface 14. Well, from the names, you can tell that that's a later version than that. So that, hence, that's the big one. That's the small one. You couldn't see them. Just a minor detail. But spotting. While I'm thinking of it, also you can see this, the U. It shows you the U and V, but it's not always easy to see those. But that's helpful as well. Now I've got no problem with that being degree 7, not at all. This one, it might not need to be degree 7 because it's pretty flat in that area, and we might be able to reduce that, to be honest, at some point. So this is the area of transition. Because we've used detach and these are 100%, then we're going to have G2 along there. Again, don't just assume that you have, but even though I know that we have, I'm going to check it anyway, because it's always possible to make a mistake and think something's accurate and find it's not. It's like when we, align this edge to that back edge. You could assume that those are accurate, and they're not, which is something else that we do need to sort out actually. I'll do that in a minute. So in this area, this we know that that's curved and that's flat, and we need to transition to. So I'm now going to do an align, object edit, align, and I want to go from here to here. It's going to be a partial edge. Now, once again, we should put a curve on that edge. If we want to keep the Z values of this, put a curve on that edge and do a trim there. So let's do that. So we'll go duplicate that edge. Now this catches me out sometimes. If you go into duplicate and no rebuild, you can accidentally, and you can just about see it there. I've got, instead of picking the edge, I've just gone slightly inside that surface. So you want to make sure that you drag that up there and hit go. So that it's exactly on the edge. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with all sorts of problems. And then we're going to go into trim that one, that curve to there and there. Unfortunately, we didn't have to put curves on there and extend them, which is good. So we're going to align that now to that curve. So we're going to object edit that line. Obviously, we can only align it to a curve in position. I mean, it's worth putting that G2 continuity on there, even though we know it's 0, because as soon as I start aligning here, I could mess that up. If I end up modifying these CVs, then I'll mess that up. Obviously, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to align that to the curve, not the edge. So again, we can use it. We can see in the names what's going on there. And it's wise to look at that from the top. Just check that that's not messing things up too much, which it is. Now, we do expect, if I match that in position there, all I'm changing is the CVs on the end, and we actually want to blend that through. But the big thing is that it's pulled those CVs in, and that's down to this position influence. What it's doing is it's taking the positions of the CVs on this, or on that curve rather, and aligning them or making them consistent with that. Whereas if we want to keep the original spacing, better off doing this, bringing it back to 0, so that we keep the spacing of the originals there. And we are not 100% on there, which, not too surprising. So it may be, and this is a transition piece, so this doesn't matter too much, we may have to increase the degree. Now that's gone to 0.007. I've got tolerance of 0.001 in here, so I'm having to increase it to 5. That's no problem really, because it's a transition, very much, you know, defined at one end, defined at the other end by two other surfaces. So if you need to increase the degree there, that's okay. If you need to increase it to degree 16, that's not okay, but degree 5 is acceptable. But the other thing, what we also want to do here is I'll just modify the NCVs. That's not going to be good because that's going to just introduce a lump here. So we always want to blend this, make the change more supple. The other thing I mentioned, and so with blend, currently I've got 2 CV rows being affected with a blend factor of 0. If you're doing this and you want to hold the continuity at the other end, then I would make that the maximum you can, so 4, so it doesn't affect this other end. If I make it 5, that it almost inevitably that's going to not be curvature continuity, so it's broken it because I've affected this this hole here, which I mustn't do. So I must take that back to 4. This is why it's good having that on actually. The other thing you want to do, and it's not very obvious here, but instead of blend factor of 0, you always want blend factor of 1 when you're trying to hold the other end, which is what we're doing. So you always want maximum CV rows, or nearly always maximum CV rows, and blend factor of 1 when you're in this situation, blending from one end to the other. Even though it's any position, it's still well worth doing to just make sure that it's a nice smooth transition. I did say that the degree this way is probably unnecessary. We don't really need degree 7. There's no harm in leaving it as degree 7, but I would actually change that down to degree 5. If I do that, I also need to think about the extra CV rows that I'm affecting, because if I drop that down, you'll see it screws up we lose the continuity that's in. So to make that degree 5, the reason I'm making it degree 5 is because eventually we want G2 at this end, G2 at that end, and the minimum you need for that is degree 5. If on the other hand you wanted to make that G3 at both ends, then you're going to need you will need degree 7. But we just go with with degree 5. So this is what can catch you out. Is this? I've changed the degree down, but I haven't changed the extra rows down. So now it's even lost tangency. We're now out of tangency. So you now want to, if you change this down, always change this down as well. You should always be thinking of both of them. So we're only affecting these CVs here, not these ones, which means we keep the G2 at that end. Now I've aligned that only to the curve. I now want to align it to this surface. And the reason, if you remember, why I use the curve is just so that in the top view or plan view, those points will only move up and down in Z as opposed to moving outboard in Y. So keep the plan view shape exactly as we had. So now we want to just go and accept that, and we want to now align this to the surface. When we do this, if I hit the just the OTA, you can see I've not got partial on, but because I've got auto update on, it's fine. I can just put partial on. I haven't got history on because I don't think it's necessary. I can always put history on later anyway. Don't really think it's necessary here. You just have to be careful with history that you don't leave it on with a line. I mean, there are times when you want to keep it. If you wanted to change this surface and see what happened, you'd obviously create history on. But here we're hoping that this surface and this surface aren't going to change, that we're just aligning that, and that's going to be it. So I'm not putting that on. But you can always delete it. You know, if you left it on, then you can always go up and delete construction history afterwards if you wanted to. Now here, I don't want G0, I now want G2. So if I put G2 on, now we've got to think about this extra CV rows again. So if I put G2 on, that's what happens. So because I've got extra CV rows on of 2, it's screwing up the tendency at that end if you're affecting these CVs. So in fact, in this case, we now want to turn the blending off. So you can see there's an awful lot to think about here. One other thing that you can even see from this angle, if I go into the top view, and we've got proxy display, which shows the original, and I don't know whether you can see that, but the original actually comes out here. So what we've done by aligning it with the options we've got on at the minute, we've completely screwed up the edges. We've had a horrible S in it. And so what you want to do in this situation, these points are fine, but these points need to go out, is if you put on vector and make that Z, it means that these CVs only move up and down in Z. So a lot to think about when you're doing a line. You've got to be so clear what you're doing here. I've kept position influence of 0 on, because that means these points stay where they are. If I accidentally put that on 1, it pulls them in. Don't want that. So I'm constantly trying to think of what's going on in the Z direction, and you always want to keep looking back at that top view, just checking that it's not screwing it up. Make sure that it's still looking good in that direction. One of the things with vectors, if I come out of there and do that, if I go and was to try and match that again, you see how it's forgotten about vector, remembers absolutely everything else, but vector it just forgets about. So that catches me out a lot. So you've got to remember to put vector on every time you want to use vector. You've got to actually put it on. My opinion is that should stay on from one section to the next, because it's so important, and it screws things up if it's not right. I'm now going to save this, having done quite a bit of work. And I'm going to actually, one thing that we've never looked at here is what the highlights look like. And I'm hoping that this is all going to be lovely. But I've never looked at it, or very rarely looked at it. So if we go into ISO-ang, and we look at that from the Y direction. So if you remember, if I rotate that view with ISO-ang, it doesn't move around with view. If you go into horizontal, vertical, this is very useful for looking at transition between things. So it shows us how smooth things are, but it doesn't actually show us. It's not so effective at looking at the shape. Can't really see what's going on there. And so what you want to do is increase the repeats there until we can see what's going on. So I mean, I probably should have looked at it on the original surfaces, but I think I'm going to go with that at the minute, because I'm not sure what the highlights should look like here, to be honest. Let's look at ISO-ang, and I'm going to look at that from the Y direction. So what this is showing us is the way that if you imagine a light source from the Y direction, how is the tangency of that circle developing across there? I don't really like that 100%, I have to say. I think this goes in too far here, and my feeling is that this should come out more. And like I say, I probably should have looked at that a bit earlier on, but it's never the end of the world. So so we've only just saved that. So this is where we might use history on here. So I'm just going to see if I can improve that. Now, if I bring that back in, very, very difficult to see the CVs. But if we say create curves instead, so it puts lines on rather than having all this shaded. And we can then say show curves only. So you can see that. They're much easier to work with when you're modifying the CVs. So you can see I'm ignoring the mesh, because, as I say, the mesh was open to interpretation. We need to at this point, we need to just do our own thing and try and get this looking slightly better. So I want these lines to come out a bit further before we get into this area here. So now I'm going to use G2 continuity, not partial. I'm going to put history on because I'm going to modify this surface and watch this one change. So I'm going to go with this. The G2, I haven't got blend on because I've only got degree 5, which is fine. I don't want proxy display on. Now, as so often is the case, we just want to move these CVs up and down in Z. We have the nice pattern in plan view. I just want to see what happens if I move those points up and down in Z. And because we're down to some refinement here, we want some mouse sensitivity on here. So I'm going to make it 50 to start with, see what we get. Now I notice that I haven't got symmetry on there. So but keep your widths around value here. So I need to put the symmetry back on. Otherwise we'll have an asymmetric result. So I'm going to move that point. Got plenty of mouse sensitivity on. Just going to move that up and down. Why has the position changed? So I'm going to go into query edit. So I just press Q to get into query edit and find out what's going on here. Because I've just aligned that and I didn't spot that I've lost position. And I should do that. The reason I've lost position is because the position influence was on 0. So this is one of the beauties of having history on occasions, is that you can get back and correct things. So it actually be on 1. In other words, the spacing of those CVs is consistent with the spacing of CVs on there. That's what I want. Otherwise, the position's not guaranteed. Now let's move that point. The reason I'm moving that point is because these edges I was happy with. I might also move that point, possibly that point, but certainly that would be the biggest one. And just see if I move that slightly, and I improve those highlights. Now, weirdly, the gap is opening up, and I wasn't expecting the gap to open up. So maybe when I let go of the mouse, that will be better. Yeah. So I think what it is, well, it may be anyway, under performance options. So it wasn't updating. I think I've got everything switched on here. So under performance options, you always want all of these things switched on because sometimes you find you move something and everything doesn't update while you're doing it. You just switch everything on there. That should be the case. I don't know. I'm pretty certain, and I might be wrong, but in previous versions, I might just be imagining it. But in previous versions, I'm sure that was updating as you were doing it. So, but I might have got that wrong. I'll have to look into it. I think other than that, that's much better. I think it's so if I want to get rid of these curves, I can take show curves only off, delete curves, get rid of them, and look at that. So I'm happier with that. Down here, we're going to put a huge blend in this corner. So, we could do a bit of, I suppose we should do a bit of tweaking of that. Because I look at these things, I can't help it. It's annoying sometimes because I look at stuff and think, oh, it's not quite right. I just need to fix that. And then if you're not careful, you just end up spending hours and hours fixing stuff. But I don't know where to do this yet. I think once we trim all of this out, then a lot of this highlight will disappear anyway. I think I'll leave it as it is. It's the sort of thing that if you were doing an A-class model, you might spend, even days getting all of the highlights perfect through here, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a model. It's a quality model, but not necessarily A-class. So let's bring everything back in. So I want to get into this area here. So in plan view, we've got this curve here. Now, I only want to get to this point, and then I'm going to create a surface across this area to get this edge in. Do I actually need that? I'm not sure whether. Yeah, of course I do need that because. Oh yeah, one of the problems I realised, or one of the things I realised I've done wrong here. So let's go inside glass. Well, not quite right, anyway. is I've got this curve here, which is hanging off the edge of this surface. And that's actually not quite right. You see that surface doesn't actually intersect, which it should do. So that's a bit of a shame. So let me go into locators again. I'm going to measure the just to see how far out that is between that surface and that. So through that display, you can see there's an area here where it's going the wrong way, that we need that. Well, you can see there it's not intersecting, and it's because we pushed these points down at some point. So I've got history on from here to here. I'm going to actually take that off because if I keep the history on, that could mess things up. So I'm using hotkeys to do that. I want to put symmetry on there. Again, it's something I should have spotted a bit earlier. I'm just going to extend that through because I need that to intersect. Now, weirdly, extend is working differently on those two surfaces, and probably because of the degree, or it's probably to do with where I picked it or something. So that one I've extended, and you can see it intersects now that side surface. Don't want to extend it too far. And then this one I'll extend out. I can extend it out to there, and then to get them to be the same length, I could do a detach. If I go detach, I'll keep originals off, press go. Now I can go and click on there. So we're going to lose the symmetry because detach will only do one side. It's not going to do a symmetry operation on the other side. And then I want to do a Control-Alt on this edge, and it will trim it back to that point or detach it to that point. So it's created a little sliver of a surface there. Do the same thing on that side. So Control-Alt onto that edge and hit the space bar, and then we can get rid of those ones there that we don't need. Those. So now they're the same length. Now I need to go into surface connection. Just check that that's still aligned properly. Thank goodness it is. But we've now got this intersecting here. So this curve here, I originally did from the edge of the surface, and that's actually not quite right. I actually want to make that aligned to the intersect with these surfaces. So let's get those surfaces and that curve there. Just isolate that. So we'll go into here, and then we want to go and intersect the two. So it's a bit weird, really, in a sense, but it's under surface edit because it's associated with trimming and everything. But that's where intersect is. So intersect. We don't want history on. Well, in general, we do want history on, to be honest. But I'm not planning on changing anything. I'll keep history on. It says on both surfaces, so in other words, it's going to create a curve on surface on both of those. In this case, so select intersecting surface, which is that one. So this curve needs to be on this. It needs to be aligned to this intersect. If I go pick curve on surface, click there, you'll see that that's the inner one, that's the edge one. Doesn't matter which one you pick, they're both the same. But what we now want to do is pick that curve. Always want to see what the CVs are doing. Every time you do anything, really, you want to see what CVs are doing. Then I'm now going to go into Object Edit and align that. It's going to be G2, that one, into there. One of those curves on surface. Now, what I noticed from that, so I just picked that curve on surface, but the real subtlety, which is well worth spotting, well, absolutely essential to spot, and that's if you look at those arrows there, I've got two arrows, so it's not quite on the end. And actually, it tells me here that it's not quite on the end. In that value, it says 0.000 something 2. Easily fixed, but you've got to spot it. If I just drag that in that direction, you can see it's now one arrow. So that means it's absolutely to the end of that. If you don't get that right, then you'll end up putting in surfaces which don't align, and you'll think, what the heck's going on? So it's one of those tiny little details that's well worth spotting. I'm determined to get this surface in before we finish today, but try, or at least throw something in there. So we've got this one edge, which is that green line there. We could do something like this to create the surface that we want, the ribbon surface. We could do this, which works sometimes. If we go into MS Draft, and I'll start off with sort of default settings, if you like, take explicit control off, and we do that. Now that's given us a draft surface, which is obviously of no use whatsoever. I'll take modify range off. Goes all the way around. That's not what we want. But if you put in a draft angle, so we got the draft direction as Z, but if we make the draft angle 90, then we get that. So if I look at that from the plan view, you get this, which is sort of a ribbon surface. We could change the length of that, of course. It's got to the end of the slider, so if I use Alt and just make that a bit wider, we could do that. That'd be one possibility. We don't actually want to go all this way. We just want to come back to here. This is where modify range comes in. So we can, by default, it's going to start off there. It's just picking up from the previous operation. I can take that all the way around to there. You can see the degree comes down automatically when you do that. You can also specify explicit control if you wanted to. So that's one way of doing that. And in this case, it actually works very well. Yes, so the only thing that we might want to do there, which I'm just thinking how to do this, is we might want to make the length different from one end to the other. We can also affect that way there. Something like that. So let's go with that. So I'm now going to, obviously this is not quite the right shape. I can extend that. Again, there's lots of clues in the names. Well, looking at this is another tiny detail in Alias that's well worth picking up on. Is that's a draft surface. That's the one we're picking. So sometimes when you can't see what's going on, worth looking at the names and seeing what's happening there. So now I want to do a trim convert on this. In the Z project, don't want the originals. If I just try and trim that back to there, of course, that's not going to have enough degrees. And it's got degree 1, so let's make it degree. We'll make it degree 3. And the reason I want to make it degree 3 is because I want to align that edge eventually as G2 into this. So degree 3 makes sense. And then I'm going to align it. So I'm going to trim convert it back to that edge there. Yeah, make it degree 3. And maybe I've not got auto update on. So if you think, why is this not updating? It's because you haven't got auto update on. So let's do that. It tells me the difference between that surface and the original surface is only 0.002. Not that really matters too much. And then we can do the same thing at this end. So we trim it back to there. Now, if I try and trim that, it's going to object. Again, a tiny detail, but there's a green dot there and a red dot there. That means that on the red dot, it's not reached that end because the edge of this, of course, is slightly inboard of that curve, so it's not going to reach it. We can extend that in the function if you go into extend. I've never had any luck with auto. The idea of auto is it should allow you to do auto and then a tolerance. So if I said 10 mil, extend this 10 mil, that's what I'm saying, and then say convert. It works now. Finally, they fixed it because in all previous versions that never worked. If it doesn't work, then what you do is you select it, and then you can see the little arrow there and the red dot. Just click on the arrow, and that always works, unless it's a very long distance. But it seems like maybe auto's been fixed. I've never had it, never worked before for me in previous versions. So I'm learning something. That's good. And then we can just. Obviously, we did that in the top view, so you could see what's happening. I'm just going to do. I'm going to leave it at this point. But I'm just going to just see what happens if we say line G2 project Z this into that. So I've got Z on and all of that. So we've not quite position matched there, and that'll be because we've got too low a degree. So if we increase the degree up to 7, we might get there. If we don't quite, it's actually not far off, 0.00143, which is nothing. You know, one option is to split this up into more, but there are better options. I'm actually going to take that back down to 5, because if I get to 7 and it doesn't align, there are times when I might increase the spans. So if we increase that to 2, it actually works. And I might say that's the same as splitting it out, in fact, because it's effectively created an internal division between the inside that node's surface. And you could say that's acceptable, which it is really. But if you wanted to make this as simple as possibly could, we go back to 5. Now, the reason it doesn't align exactly is because of the spacing of the CVs compared with the spacing of the CVs on this underlying surface. So an option, let me just come out of there. Actually, one thing I should point out is that this, if you look at that by using projecting that line, it creates a curve on surface, which is fine. But the danger is if you do another a line with project on, it creates another curve on surface, and then you only have multiple ones, and then that causes havoc when you try and trim things. So you want to delete those curves on surface unless you absolutely need them. So to get that to align 100% with the minimum degree, one way of doing that is to go into surface. I'm not saying that that's essential here, but if you go into surface edit and use trim convert, rejected Z, and you want to keep originals, what we can do is to do this. So I've got that as it's an approximation of the original. Now, if I say show edge deviations, it tells me that that's actually a long way off. It says maximum 0.15, so that's between the sort of theoretical projected curve and the actual edge there. So in fact, this may not achieve anything in this case, but what we'd have to do is increase the degree in the other direction. That says maximum 0.07013 rather. So if I make it degree 7, it's still not there, so it's 0.006. So that's actually not going to do the trick. But sometimes you can do that, and if that's within 0.001, you know, well within it, then you can use that trim converted surface. You align this one to it with where the CVs actually line up, and then you can get a much more accurate alignment. But in this case, I can see that because there's a deviation between this edge and the theoretical of 0.006, that's never going to work. So I'm going to forget that one. So I'll just revert that, forget that, and we shall go back to what we had. But it's worth a try if you just want to try and absolutely minimize the. We'll come across that on many occasions. That's the situation, and I'm sure there's be some where it is actually a good thing to use that technique. But I'm just going to go for degree 7 spans 2. I've done my best to try and get that to an absolute minimum. That's where I am. And then I'm going to trim this out here. I'm not saying this is finished yet by any means, because I've just thrown this together just quickly. We're going to evaluate surface connection. Don't suppose for 1 minute that's going to be, I'll just get rid of that one. So we want to now set up a new one there, because it's only that edge and on that one. So this will need to align in this direction, and obviously down here as well. So that one won't be aligned in a minute. Let's get rid of that one. So that one will need aligning as well. But let's just see what we've got. Because all I've done is I took the original surface and I've just I don't like to leave it now. I've got to carry on and just try and align this. So this one, if we align it there, top view. I don't spin it around, it's just I hit the wrong buttons occasionally. So this one, we don't want project on, we want edge, so we're going to align it this way. It's going to be a partial edge. We want vector on with the Z direction, so that these CVs stay in that same pattern. So this is so critical that we do this, because all along we've been trying to keep these patterns in the Z direction. I am going to save this because I've got it. I think if this crashes, I've actually got carried away and gone for 20 minutes without saving, which is really not a good idea. Because you've only done so much. This is just, again, something very easily done. They just get carried away with excitement, forget that you should be aligning things. So you can see it switched vector up again, which is really irritating, but that's what it does. Also, it's moved the CVs across that way. So this is because the position influence is left on at 1. So I want that back to 0, so it doesn't move from left to right. Now, get this to align. I might have to come back next time and continue with this. First of all, that's not aligned there. So we will need a higher degree direction. And I've gone up to degree 4. If I go up to degree 5, I'd say that's probably as high as I want to go. We're actually very close now, 0.004 in position, 0.001 in here. Inevitably, it's going to pull this away because we're affecting this hole and this hole. If it's only a small amount, you can sometimes just do a little tweak on position influence, I'm hoping, and get it down to 0.001 without affecting the CVs too much. Or maybe we need to move the CVs. So it's actually moved those across. So I've got it at 0.6. I'll make that 1. What difference does it make? It pulls it quite a long way, but I'll make that 0.6. But we've got a bit of a kink in the CVs there. We've got a bit of a gap there. That should be easy to fix. But I don't like the kink there. So to get rid of the kink, as before, we'll do a blend. And then so it should, what we want to do there is to do a blend across this way. Now that doesn't look very good. It's actually, I'm talking nonsense here because the blend actually isn't affecting these points. Which is really the problem there is that it's only affecting these points. So the blend doesn't actually affect this one. So I don't like the fact that suddenly kicks off that way. What I need to do is I need to go into G1, G0 rather only. Now if I put blend on, I can take the blend from here. So it's going to blend that back. I don't really need the blend to go all the way to the other end, especially, but it's not really necessary because it's such a small change. And when we get to this end, maybe that will do something slightly different again. Let's just see what happens if I do take that all the way to there. So I've taken it to all of these holes here. Maybe I should do that. I'll take create history off because that's going to cause problems. Oddly, I've got position influence of 0.6 on, which worked before. It's slightly outside the tolerance, so let's make that a little bit more across there. 0.7 now. Might as well make it 1, really. Let's make it 1. Then it's going to be the most accurate it can be. Bit of an angle mismatch there. We'll sort that out afterwards. I want to go from this end as well. That's going to be a partial edge. And again, we've got that. Now, obviously, what I've got here is actually the 8 is too high. So I haven't counted these, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that 8 means it's actually affecting the left other end, which obviously we've got position on there. So we've got to take it back 1 to get to 7. So we've sort of blended between those two ends as subtly as we can. Now, what I want to do is I want to go in there and I want to put curvature on. I'm going to do that into that edge. Need vector on. I don't want these moving in that direction. Notice when I was in G0, it didn't matter that I didn't have a vector on, it wasn't important. This is taking us far too far across here because I've got G2 on, it's affecting that row and that row, but then blend on top of that is trying to do 6 rows, which is even beyond, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's screwing up position match on that end. So again, we need to drop this down as we increase the level of continuity. We need to drop that down so that it doesn't blend all the way across. Interesting that angle's coming down. That's just luck, I think. I'm certain of this. And then we'll go from this end to here. So this time we're putting G2 on this end. So now our extra CV rows are saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's screwing up at this end because we've got too many CV rows on. So again, we need to bring that down again so that we don't affect these CV, these holes here. Now that's not very nice because it's now introduced a big gap there. If I take blending off altogether, yeah, so there's a gap appeared there, and I'm not sure why that's quite so big because it says 1.37. I think at that point I'm going to stop because this could take some time to just get this right here.